Imagine standing in the middle of a vast, desolate valley. The sun beats down of dry bones, representing the spiritual state of the Israelites. But these bones, as lifeless and scattered as they were not beyond hope. God was about to demonstrate his power to bring life even to the dead. Personal reflections and examples. Let me share a personal story with you. A close friend of mine once lost his business, his home, and even his sense of self-worth in a short span of time. He described his life during that period as being like those dry bones, empty, lifeless, without hope. He had given up on dreams, on relationships, and even on God. But then, in the middle of his darkest time, something miraculous happened. He began attending a small prayer group. It wasn't anything extraordinary at first, just a few people gathered, sharing their struggles and praying together. But over time, he began to feel something stirring inside him. Slowly but surely, the bones of his life started to come back together. Opportunities he thought were lost forever began to reappear. Relationships that had been broken started to heal. It was as though God had breathed life into his dry bones, just as he did in Ezekiel's vision. What about you? What are the dry bones in your life? Maybe it's a failed relationship, a lost job, or a shattered dream. Whatever it is, the story of Ezekiel reminds us that God can bring life where there seems to be only death. The power of faith and obedience. Let's go back to the valley of dry bones. As Ezekiel stood in that valley, God asked him a question: can these bones live? It's a question that seems to defy logic. Of course, dry bones can't live. They've been dead for who knows how long, and there's no life left in them. But Ezekiel doesn't respond with disbelief. Instead, he says, "Sovereign Lord, only you know." This is a profound moment of faith. Ezekiel recognizes that while he cannot see a way for these bones to live again, God can. How often do we face situations that seem impossible, and our first reaction is to give up? We look at the problem and say, "There's no way out. It's over." But what if we responded like Ezekiel, with trust in God's power? Consider the story of Abraham and Sarah. They were promised a child, but as they grew older, it seemed impossible. Sarah was well past the age of childbearing, and yet, when God promised them a son, Abraham believed. And that faith was rewarded with the birth of Isaac. Just as God brought life to Abraham and Sarah's situation, He can breathe new life into ours. A gradual transformation. When Ezekiel prophesies to the bones, something incredible happens. The bones begin to come together, forming skeletons. Muscles and tendons cover them, and finally, skin forms over the bodies. But even after all of this, there's one thing missing: life. These newly formed bodies are still lifeless, lying motionless in the valley. This part of the vision is a powerful metaphor for how God often works in our lives. Restoration is often a process, not an instantaneous event. God brings the pieces of our lives together one step at a time. He may restore a relationship, give us a new opportunity, or strengthen our faith, but sometimes it takes time for the full transformation to happen. This reminds me of a story from the Bible where God used a gradual process to restore someone's faith and life: Job. Job lost everything, but through his faithfulness and patience, God gradually restored what was lost. Job's story shows us that even in the darkest valleys, God's plan. Prophesying over the dead. One of the most powerful moments in Ezekiel's vision is when God tells him to prophesy to the dead bones. Imagine the scene: Ezekiel, standing in a valley of death, is asked to speak life into the bones. It seems absurd. How could speaking to bones make any difference? But Ezekiel obeys, and as he speaks, the bones begin to move. Sometimes, God asks us to do things that seem impossible or even foolish. He asks us to speak life into dead situations, to trust Him even when there's no visible sign of hope. It's in these moments of obedience that we see God's miraculous power at work. I once heard the story of a woman who was diagnosed with a terminal illness. The doctors had given up hope, and there was nothing more they could do. But instead of resigning herself to death, she began to pray fervently, speaking words of healing and life over her body. To the amazement of her doctors, her condition began to improve. Slowly but surely, her health was restored, and she was eventually declared cancer-free. This story, like Ezekiel's vision, reminds us that God's power to bring life is not limited by our circumstances or by what seems possible. The breath of life. After the bones had come together and the bodies were fully formed, Ezekiel was given another command: to prophesy to the breath. And when he did, the breath of life entered the bodies, and they stood up, a vast army. This moment is the climax of the vision. It wasn't enough for the bodies to be formed. They needed the breath of God to truly live. In the same way, it's not enough for us to have the right structures in place in our lives. We can go to church, read the Bible, and say the right things, but without the breath of God, without His Spirit, our lives are lifeless. This is a powerful reminder of our dependence on God. We need His Spirit to fill us, to give us life and purpose. Without it, we are like those lifeless bodies in the valley. The lesson of hope. The story of Ezekiel and the Valley of Dry Bones is ultimately a story of hope. It's a reminder that no situation is too far gone for God. He can bring life to even the most hopeless places. Whether it's a broken relationship, a shattered dream, or a lost hope, God can restore it. The lesson for us is to trust in God's power, even when things seem impossible. Like Ezekiel, we need to prophesy over the dead areas of our lives, trusting that God can and will bring life. And we must remember that it's often a process. Restoration doesn't always happen overnight, but if we remain faithful, God will complete the work He has begun. So, as you go through your own valleys, remember this story. Speak life into your situation, trust in God's power, and wait for the breath of life to come. God is faithful, and He will bring life to even the driest of bones. In the end, just as the bones were revived and turned into a vast army, God can turn your most hopeless moments into victories. Stay faithful and never stop believing in the miracle of restoration.
If this message resonates with you, hit that like button and let the universe know you're ready for your breakthrough. Subscribe to our channel for more transformative insights and guidance on your journey to abundance. Share this video with friends and family who need to hear this today. Let's amplify our positive energy together. Your engagement not only helps us grow but also strengthens the cosmic energy we are building as a community. Together, we can uplift each other and manifest our dreams into reality, one positive action at a time.